Okay, I think we are live. So, welcome to Tamarah's Closet. And today I'm just so very excited because I have a really special guest. And this is really exciting because I've dreamed of meeting a best-selling author for so many years and actually having a chance to interview them. And today that dream is coming true for me. So I'm just thrilled to have this very special guest. And I actually met this man on Facebook as a friend request from a mutual friend. And I just felt like, wow, the stars are aligned for sure. So this was just meant to be, and this man is really special because he's not your typical best-selling author. He has the most amazing story, and it's the most amazing rags to riches story, and the challenges that he has had to overcome just to get to where he stands today is truly an inspiration to anyone who has a big dream, whether it's to be a best-selling author, an artist, musician, actor, whatever, or a director of a Broadway show. He is such an inspiration. So his story is really a big reason why I wanted him on the show, but also because of his exciting new thriller that has just come out recently, and it is The Promiscuous Puppeteer. Who it still has me intrigued because I'm in the actually most exciting part of the book right now myself, and so I'm looking forward to how this all comes together. So today I have the pleasure of introducing the man behind The Promiscuous Puppeteer, and it's it's a thriller. This book is a thriller, and basically I'm just going to let the man himself tell you a little bit about the story, since he is close to this and it's personal to him. So without any hesitation, we are here today to celebrate and welcome Walter Biondi to Tamarah's Closet, and welcome the Promiscuous Puppeteer. So come on out and see us, Walter. You got a little mask.
Let me put my mask on too, Tamarah. Hi to you and all your friends. You know, it's interesting, the mask that's on the Promiscuous Puppeteer's face is there by design because it's a metaphor meant to hide something which the reader won't realize until they have finished the book. So the mask really is a metaphor. It's hiding something about a lady whose nickname is the Promiscuous Puppeteer. Now, I've gone to some events, book signing events, and some speaking engagements, and seen some people come to those events all excited about the opportunity to sit and talk about the book and my past. And some of them are wearing these masks, and it just puts a big smile on my face. One gave me one of the masks, which I just showed you a moment ago, so it's kind of like a small little fad that's starting. The Promiscuous Puppeteer. Let's talk about the book for a moment. When I was researching for this book, starting about 3.5, 4 years ago, I had an idea of what I wanted to write, and I was taking notes and learning a lot of new things, and ultimately was doing my own turquoise mining in Nevada. And I rented a turquoise mine during the weekend when they were closed down and paid a fee. I went in and I was able to dig my own turquoise. And while I was sitting on a bluff overlooking the turquoise mine where I was working, I began to daydream a little bit about the story that I was putting together in my mind. And it suddenly dawned on me what I could make this story about. I had originally intended to have a thriller around criminal activities involving the mining industry. It was all fiction, of course. Not to say that those things don't really happen. I'm sure they do. But I needed to have someone that would make this story what it is today. And it dawned on me while I was sitting on that bluff that the name, The Promiscuous Puppeteer, could be the right character for this book. And I chose that name because in this story, The primary character is a native Mexican American woman. And I say native Mexican American, that means essentially that her ancestors were here in the southwest part of the United States when Mexico, or when the southwest part of the United States was still part of Mexico. And so those were the original Mexicans who are here now in the United States, if their ancestors go back that far, so that they could be called Native Mexican Americans. And in this case, the nickname Promiscuous Puppeteer means that this lady had a difficult and sordid past, one which she wasn't proud of. And she needed to change her life. She was put into circumstances not of her own choosing, and ultimately made a better life for herself and was able to further some things, causes that she believed in the process of bettering her life. And she became known as the puppeteer, that second part of her name, because she became very expert at manipulating people and events. And so the promiscuous puppeteer, meaning she had a sordid past, and puppeteer, meaning that she was known by people who knew her well, which were not many, as being someone who had a gift, a knowledge, a skill, an ability to do something with regards to controlling events and people. So as I decided how I was going to write this story and how the story would flow, I had a secret about that story which I had to preserve throughout the entire writing of the book, and I had to keep it until the end. Something you have yet to read, and I can't wait to hear what you think when you reach that point. When I finished writing that book and the story that's contained within it, I remember writing the last chapter, and I like to tell people, I do have deep feelings. I am an emotional person. I am a kind and generous person. And so that sometimes surfaces when I reach moments in my life when something touches me, such as the finishing of this book. I spent 4 months writing night and day, literally 16 to 20 hours every day, 7 days a week, because the words were there for me. And I didn't want to stop writing. I didn't want to take a break for fear that I would lose my momentum in that writing process. And when I finished that last chapter in the book, I can remember tears came to my eyes because I did not want this story to end. But I knew that it had to, because it was time for me to bring a closing to all that I'd hidden from the readers up to that point. And I finished the last page, and I had tears streaming down my cheeks. And I remember thinking to myself, I never want to forget this moment. This has been 4 years in the making, and finishing that last page in the book was the culmination of a big effort for me, and the writing of something which has drawn a lot of positive reaction from a lot of people since the book's been issued. So the story is essentially about the Promiscuous Puppeteer. It's about a gold mining industry, an exploration company, and some of the good people and the bad people who I fictionalized, who are involved in the process of trying to make a major gold discovery. But you would think, well, that could be a little too specific, and so I'll generalize by saying that there are a lot of bad characters in this. There's politicians who are crooked. There are Chinese intelligence officials who are bad people. There are some people in the Chinese government who are bad people. There's some industry leaders who do some bad things, and some good people as well. And so the Promiscuous Puppeteer is a lady who sees this all. She knows what's going on, and she decides that perhaps she can involve herself in some way and help bring about perhaps what is the most momentous gold discovery worldwide by doing the things that she's capable of doing, she's so gifted at doing, and using the people who she has used in the past to accomplish that objective.
Wow. Well, I just, the book is just, it's amazing to me because you're so descriptive in it, and you did such a fabulous job with that I was just really impressed, because from the very first, chapter of reading, and then the end of that, the way you ended that first chapter, I was totally thrilled, because I've been looking, I was telling you when we were talking before how you know, been written movies and, you know, and wishing there was a really great thriller out there that just kept captivated me. And when I started reading your book, I got really excited. And so I was like, well, finally, you know, something that was different. You know, it's just different. It's a different story, and it's just the way you were so descriptive. I mean, I really got such a great visual with the characters and the scenery out west, and I could just totally visualize it like as if I was just really watching a movie. So that to me, that was, I mean, you did a great job with that, Walter. I was really, really impressed. So you know, I'm excited for you. But I want to go, before we go into the book a little more, I wanted to talk a little bit about Walter the man, because Walter, you have such an amazing background, and there was a time when you were young and you were living on the streets and you were homeless. And here today, you're a best-selling author, and you were just announced award-winning author for The Promiscuous Puppeteer. So, Walter, there must be some really incredible emotions going on when you reflect back to where you used to be when you were at that time on the streets and where you are now. So how do you feel when you think about that and when you see how far you've come?
It took me a long time to be able to talk about my past. My past was a sordid past, just like the Promiscuous Puppeteers. And I believe that in my heart of hearts, I probably drew on some of my past in writing this book, because I created a lady who I became her scribe, so to speak, even though she's a fictional character. I became her scribe, and that was not hard for me to do because I could identify with the past that she had lived. In my past, I was a street kid. I was homeless and wandering the streets. I had nothing. I had no one. I had no friends, no family, no money. But I had learned to become a musician and a vocalist prior to becoming homeless. And one of the instruments that I learned to play was a guitar. And I can remember, and I'll just digress for a brief moment, I can remember when I needed some money, I would go sit on a, and that was always, I always needed some money, but I would sit on a street corner wearing raggedy clothes, looking terrible, not having a haircut, dirty, holes in my clothes, playing a guitar, and I could play fairly well, and singing, and people would throw me pennies or nickels. A year later, when I had a little bit more money and I could dress a little better and get a haircut and look nicer, I'd sit on that same street corner and play the same music, and people would throw me quarters and 50-cent pieces and dollar bills, all based on my appearance. Can you imagine? And that taught me a lesson. That taught me that how people perceive me and how I perceive myself for the purposes of motivating myself to do better and to move forward in my life was an important consideration. Well, let me go back to what it was like. Living on the streets, I nearly died 2 times. I was in and out of jails. I was beaten. I was robbed. I had many times nothing to eat. I went from 180 pounds down to 115 pounds, which for someone my height, 5'10", was very, very thin and dangerously malnourished. I had a very difficult time surviving, sleeping on park benches, sleeping in the back of empty cars. I'd find a garage door that was open in the middle of the winter so I could get out of the wind, and I would sleep on someone's garage floor. I would create a bed of leaves and bury myself with the leaves at times just to try to get warm. There was a park nearby that had a grill, a stone grill that people would use in the summertime to grill their hamburgers on in the park, and I would throw firewood in there, sticks and branches that I could find in the woods, and start a fire and just stand by that fire all night long trying to keep warm, becoming hypothermic at times. I had to steal bread sometimes because I didn't have the money to buy something. And I say that just as people might recall the Broadway show Les Miserables, and the character Jean Valjean, who stole bread and ended up in jail for having done so. There were times when I had to take empty Coke bottles or soda bottles out of the sides of the machines, if you can remember seeing them sticking on the sides of soda machines, and I'd take those and cash them in for 2 cents a piece. just so I could get enough money to buy a can of Spam, something to eat. And then I would share that with another person who was homeless and who was starving. So I had hit rock bottom, Tamarah, and it was a horrible feeling. I had no goals. I had no idea how I was going to get out of it. I thought by being a homeless street kid that there would be something that I would enjoy about it, a newfound freedom of some sort, where now I could do what I want to do and be the person I want to be. But the person I had become was despicable. It was a wretched life. And ultimately, an event occurred where I decided one day, a light bulb went on in my head, a little fire in the belly made me decide that I wasn't going to live the rest of my life worrying about whether I was going to be in jail the next day, or worrying about whether I was going to meet with an early demise, or worrying about whether or not I could ever do anything with my life other than just barely exist. And that time came when I was 18 years old, and that event changed my life.
Wow. Wow. I don't even know how you survived all that, because you know, that just amazes me, because I can't even stand a little bit of cold, and for you to be out in the weather and get out. I mean, it blows my mind that you had to go through something that that catastrophic, you know, and then come out of it to where you are today. I mean, I think it's something that you know, should be very proud of. You've come a long way, baby. You know.
Thank you.
It's great, and so I know that you probably have a very special place in your heart for homeless people as well, and have much compassion that a lot of other people may not have, because you know what it's like to be there and truly be there, and but you came out, so you know that's the important part. But you know, I just wanted you to share a little bit about you know, what was the last straw for you, I guess, was that, because during that time, how did you decide that I don't know, what really pushed you over the edge to really get out of it? I mean, were you wanting to? Did you have any inspiration to write then, or how did that? You know, I guess, how did you, in any time that you were homeless, was there a period that the idea of writing your story, I guess, was that possibly what pushed you out of it? That you had like a goal that would, you know, that you would write your story one day? Did you know you wanted to be a writer at that point, or?
No, I didn't know. I guess I was in a quagmire. I was too bogged down with my own negative thinking, my negative thoughts, and I'll get to that in a moment. We are what we think. But what I was feeling that changed my life was as a result of having been arrested again and put in jail, and looking through the bars of that jail, and deciding then and there, as I looked through the bars of that jail, that I did not want to live my life like this. And there was something that a wonderful uncle of mine had shared with me sometime previously, before I became a homeless street kid. And that was something that was written by a famous motivational speaker named Earl Nightingale. And those words were written down. I had them on a piece of paper, and when I got out of jail, the charges were dropped, thank goodness. I read that again, and I went to a local library that was on the main street of our town where I was a homeless kid, and I remember the librarian in there who had been so kind to me, realizing that I was homeless, living in a wretched life, and she would always wink at me when I would come in to use the bathroom in the library during the day, or to get warm in the wintertime. And I went to her, and I said, I'm looking for anything you might have written by a man named Earl Nightingale, and the speech was called The Strangest Secret. Now, for those of your friends who are listening who would like to look that up on YouTube, I urge them I urge them, look up that speech. It's 15 minutes long. I have listened to it many times over the years, and that speech motivated me. The librarian took out a record, put on a record player, put a headphone set on my head, and said, just listen. And I listened to it. And that speech was about what you think most about is what you eventually become. And it had a significant impact on me. The words I just spoke right now may not sound like they're very earth-shattering, but if you listen to the speech, it all comes home to you. You realize that if we spend most of our time thinking certain thoughts, then that's basically the kind of person we're going to be. They could be negative thoughts. We can watch negative television. We can engage in negative conversations, be it politics or any subject in the world. If we're negative and negative and negative all the time, then we tend to live a negative life. And our thoughts generally stay in that rut. And the speech that Earl Nightingale gave was along the lines of, if you force yourself all the time to just think positive thoughts and to set small baby step goals and gradually increase those goals and those objectives and think positively, then perhaps you are going to become a positive person. Now, I had not gone past the 9th grade in the public school system. And I did have a teacher in the 8th grade, Dr. Ron Schmoyer, who I just went to see in South Carolina last spring to thank him for something he did for me that he didn't realize he'd done for me. He was my biology teacher, and he had assigned me to the school newspaper to write articles once a week for the school newspaper, and I found it to be something I enjoyed doing. And it was the first time I had an opportunity to write. I liked it, enjoyed it. He motivated me and inspired me, and I was a good student in his classroom. He later became a medical doctor. I tracked him down a couple of years ago, and then surprised him on his doorstep last spring. He's in his late 70s now, he and his wife, and introduced myself as that wayward child who was on the verge of becoming a homeless street kid, who he helped motivate and inspire to think in terms of what I might be able to do that I might enjoy, and writing was one of them. But no, when I was in jail and I was a homeless street kid, the furthest thing from my mind at that moment was writing or becoming a writer. When I came out of that situation, after listening to the Earl Nightingale speech, The Strangest Secret, please, anybody who's interested, look it up on YouTube and listen to it, The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. I began to say to myself, I have to do something positive. And what would that be? Well, I took a GED high school test and I passed it. It wasn't hard. I began to set small little goals. I began to find part-time jobs that I could work. Gradually, I got up to working 60 hours a week. I saved a little money and I bought a small Ford Falcon. I remember it. It was a 1960 Ford Falcon for $50. It barely ran, but it got me to where I needed to go to get from job to job. So again, what I'm saying is I made small decisions to make small progress, always looking to set small goals for the next thing and then the next thing. And I began to think more positively. And following those words of you are what you think most about, I began to think about what I wanted to try to do next. I've been in the U.S. Navy. I served for the country in that capacity, and that was another small accomplishment in my life. While I was in the Navy, I took some college courses, which I didn't get credit for at the time. And when I got out, I became a police officer in Washington, D.C., and I took more college courses. And then from there, I became a deputy United States Marshal, and I enrolled in college courses that were almost full-time. While I was working a required 50-hour work week, I would go to college every night on Saturdays, and gradually I got my bachelor's degree. I passed my law school admission tests and was admitted to Temple University Law School. So I kept setting goals and kept working towards them. In that process, I realized I had changed, and I realized that I was a positive thinking person and that I was goal setting, and I wanted to always try to raise the bar. So I wrote something down, and I'll never forget the day when I did it. I was 23 years old. I was sitting in the college library in the evening researching for something that I was writing for my English course that I was taking. And those words that came to me were to make a distinction between the words aspiration and inspiration. I was inspired, and I had to have some aspirations. And so I wrote down something very simple that I have lived with all these years. and carried with me. And I've used it to help guide other people, to help other people who are lost or having difficulty finding their way, and to talk to them in many ways for many hours. But I would include in those discussions and in presentations that I make today that I considered aspiration to be not the moth that's drawn by the light of the nearest light bulb. Anyone can do that. So a moth that's drawn by the light of the nearest light bulb is not a great accomplishment. Aspiring to do that is not much of an aspiration. Real aspiration is the moth that's drawn by the light of the most distant star. And that's what I decided I was going to do. Always aspire to reach further and higher beyond what the average person was going to do. And then, if I didn't quite reach that most distant star, at least I would be further ahead than I would have been had I not had that kind of aspiration at all. So those kinds of words help motivate me and inspire me to have an aspiration to always move forward. Gradually, I did very well in a career that began at about that time.
Right. Now, you were awarded some really high honor or something from the president. What, were you not? Was that?
Yeah, it was. When I became a deputy U.S. Marshal, I finished my college education and began to work very hard at trying to do well with the career I had. Gradually, I was promoted within the U.S. Marshal Service and became one of the directors of the agency. During that process, I was the chief inspector on loan to Interpol. I was chief of training for the whole agency. I was chief of security for the entire federal court system, and many other jobs. And then I became one of the directors of the agency, and I was ultimately asked if I would take a position in the U.S. Customs Service, and I became one of the commissioners in several positions as one of the commissioners of the U.S. Customs Service. Ultimately, because of some of the work that my subordinates and I had accomplished, President Clinton selected me as his Distinguished Senior Executive of the Year. And that was, to me, the hallmark of my life and my career, to have gone from rags to riches, as you started saying, and as you opened up this interview. I went from literally living in clothes that were filled with holes that hadn't been washed in God knows how long, to working in the coveted corner executive suite, to wearing tuxedos to major events in Washington, D.C., to going to meetings on a weekly basis with the heads of other federal law enforcement agencies like the director of the FBI and the Secret Service and ATF, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and others. I went from being a raggedy street kid in a jail cell looking up through the bars to being equal to the highest people in federal law enforcement in the United States.
Yeah, I just think that's amazing. I really, I mean, that, to me, that is just something that you will carry with you forever. I mean, that's an amazing honor, and it's just an amazing accomplishment for everything that you've done. And I wanted to ask you, I didn't mention this before, but who would you say, most people have some type of mentor that they carry throughout their life, or, you know, we have different ones at different periods, but is there someone in your life right now that you sort of mentor after, someone that you look up to that kind of keeps you pushing forward, that you follow? And it doesn't even have to be a famous person. It could be just someone in your life.
I don't have any one particular person. There's so many wonderful people out there who provide me with motivation and inspiration, and I'm going to take a moment to point out just how much of an impact you yourself have had on me, along with someone else. For example, I'll mention who I found on Facebook, who is a constant source of inspiration and motivation. Her name is Jennifer Smith, who every day posts beautiful things. For example, this morning she posted, "If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change." That was written by Wayne Dwyer. And it's so true. So every day I feel like I have mentors like you, and like Jennifer Smith, and many other people who are just a constant source of inspiration for me who help me feel as though I need to aspire to set my goals a little higher even today. In the world that I'm in, the work that I do, I look for people who are positive thinkers, positive speakers, people who have a charisma, a certain amount of persona about them that makes me feel good. And so I try, like I have since the day when I looked through those bars in that jail cell, decided that I needed to become someone different. I needed to think more positively, and I need to become the person that I thought most about. That carries through to this very day. And as I've written to you in the past, I've thanked you for all that you do, not only for all the people that follow you, who are your friends, who are listening to your beautiful videos and your wonderful sense of humor and your inspirational advice. You are one of those people who have also had an impact on me, and you continue to have that impact on me to this very day, Tamarah.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. I really am. It's nice to know that I'm doing something good. You know? So that does. Thank you for sharing that. That really is great. I have to ask you though, what if you could give like just a little piece of advice to someone or inspiration to someone who is maybe there's someone who's got a big dream. Maybe there's a viewer out there that's got this big dream, but they're down on their luck and they still have this big dream and they're just waiting for that miracle to happen. Is there some kind of piece of advice you would or inspiration you would give to them, or hope, I guess?
I'd love to. There's so many things that I can share with you, and so tell me when you want me to stop. Thomas Jefferson once said, and I love to quote other people, and I've written some of my own as well, but he once said something very simple, and yet it has so much meaning, that the harder I work, it seems the more luck I have. And just think about that sentence for a moment. That's what Thomas Jefferson said, and I believe it to be true. The artist Picasso, and whether you like all of his art or not doesn't matter. He said something that had an impact on me, and that was that only put off to tomorrow. If you're kind of person sometimes who procrastinates and says, I don't feel like doing this today, I'll get to it later. But if you're the kind of person who puts off till tomorrow what you're willing to die for, leaving left undone. And so people say, well, I'll put it off tomorrow. Well, then you're willing to die leaving it left undone, because so many of those things that you put off to tomorrow never do get done. And people also succeed because they have momentum in their life. They keep busy. I still work oftentimes 80 hours a week. I don't need to. I don't have to. I enjoy it. It became a part of my life. I used to, when I was younger, say, I'm tired, I want to go home, I don't want to do blah, 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 whatever. We all go through phases like that. But if you turn that around and say, I want to go to work, and I want to accomplish something, and it may take a week, it may take a month, but there are certain goals and objectives I'm setting for myself here, then eventually I'm going to succeed at something. And that therein lies the thought that successful people do what unsuccessful people are unwilling to do. And that carries a lot of sway with me. There's no absolute easy way to say that you're going to accomplish the world and motivate someone to carry that with them every day, because they'll lose some of these thoughts 2 days later, 3 days later. And so what they need to do is to carry that inspiration with them, write down words that are going to motivate them, think about the positive things that they're trying to do, to start thinking of themselves as a success in whatever it is that they're doing, whatever that objective may be, and not just that one, but all the successive objectives that come thereafter. Walt Disney, we all know Walt Disney, remember him, those who remember him, said that our dreams can come true if we commit ourselves to pursue them. But if we don't commit ourselves to pursuing our dreams, how can we possibly expect them to come true? So these are simple thoughts, but people, I think, the ones I've talked to and the people I've gone to give speeches to, I tell them, write down these things or things like them And I find a lot of motivation on Facebook and Twitter and some of these other social media websites where people are posting beautiful sayings. I click on those sometimes because they help me from day to day to get my engine started, and get revved up, and to get moving. And as humans, we tend to live up to our expectations of our own selves if we create expectations for ourselves and live those expectations every day. So these are just a few of the examples of the kinds of things that I think about. I am not a perfect person. I'm like probably a lot of other people. It takes me sometimes a day or two to get myself recharged. I'll take a break, or I'll slow down, or I might get discouraged at a problem that I'm having. And when that happens, I just think about the things I've just said to you here today. I look to you. I look to Jennifer Chris-Smith, many other people who post beautiful things for all of us to read. That helps me say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to solve this problem. I'm not going to back away from it. So mentors in my life, and then working with what they have said to me. There's so many of them, literally many dozens of them, hundreds of them perhaps. And ultimately, it led me to always set the goal a little bit higher, to try to achieve something just a little bit more. Gradually, as I went through my career and finished that career that I described to you earlier, I gravitated into the arts. I'm an oil painter. I'm a gemstone faceter. I facet gemstones. I'm a silversmith. I like rock hounding. I'm a musician. I'm not a very good vocalist anymore. My voice is going. But I gravitated towards the arts and writing. And I've been writing for many years. Going back to during my career years, I wrote a lot. But I didn't ultimately get published until about 5 or 6 years ago with Jeremiah's Tale, which became a nominal bestseller, and then followed by that with writing The Promiscuous Puppeteer, which is my baby today.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting. The people that I've interviewed so far have everybody, while they have this one thing that they sort of concentrate on, I'm finding out that they all have so many other talents that it's just unbelievable. It's really fun when you learn that someone, while like for you, we're here today about the Promiscuous Puppeteer, but we find out you do oil paintings, you make jewelry, and you showed me a piece of jewelry before we aired. Do you still have that sitting there?
I do. This is when I was preparing to write the Promiscuous Puppeteer, I rented a turquoise mine in Tonopah, Nevada, which is where the book's first chapter begins. And I was digging out turquoise, mining it out of the ground, and I brought a lot home, and I made some jewelry out of it. And this is a turquoise pendant, the silversmithing that I had done myself. And I've made many pieces, and the customers are there for me, thank goodness, and I appreciate their willingness to patronize me with some purchases from the jewelry that I make. And I go to various jewelry fairs once in a while, and I'll display my jewelry and sell some of it. There's two points that I just came to mind as I was just saying that to you, Tamarah, if I may digress just for a moment, to tell people two things that mean a lot to me. When people are working hard towards an objective, sometimes they run into a brick wall again and again and again, and they get discouraged. They tend to back off and say, well, this just isn't possible. But if they ask themselves seriously, is there any remote chance of possibility that I might just be so close to breaking through this problem that if I just stick with it a little while longer, I might just solve this problem? And I liken that to a caterpillar. It's like when a caterpillar thinks that its world is coming to an end, if it just holds on a little while longer, it's going to turn itself into a butterfly. And it's at that last moment, the darkest moment, I've had many of them in my life, when the darkest moment of worrying about a problem and not being able to solve it, when we ask ourselves whether we should just give up and walk away from this particular issue or problem, if we just hang on and try harder, a little harder for a little longer, sometimes a sudden breakthrough happens. And I liken that to, again, it's gold mining related, I liken that to a moment when someone's standing in the middle of a gold field, which, by the way, there are plentiful gold fields out there. It's just a question of whether or not they're economical. But most people don't realize that they're standing on top of gold. I was walking on top of millions of dollars worth of gold in a place in Idaho when I was researching this book, and someone said to me, "Do you realize how much gold you're walking on top of right now?" And I didn't know. I didn't realize it. And eventually, some people will figure out how they're going to get that gold out of the ground, how they're going to mine it. So in life, technically speaking, we are surrounded by gold fields every day. Various pursuits and occupations that we have and opportunities that present themselves to us, and we're standing in the middle of a gold field. Problem is, we just don't know how to mine it. We don't know how to pull that gold out of the ground and how to capitalize on it, how to make hay while the sun's shining, do something good with it. And that's what we need to do, is to focus on what we're standing on and do something with it and turn it into something very positive and something very beneficial, whether for ourselves or for others.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I read a lot of personal development books too, and every successful person who's ever written a personal development book about how to create success, they all say the same thing, that most people never achieve their success because they quit right before they're successful. So it's like you said, it's usually darkest right before the dawn, right before you're about to have that big breakthrough. It's when you feel like giving up and throwing in the towel, that if you would just hang in there a little bit longer, you're on the verge of a breakthrough. And if people could just realize that and push and just hang on just a little bit tighter, they would see their dreams come to fruition. And because the dreams are, and success is 80% mindset anyway. I mean, and I've read that time and time again, and it's only like 20% skill. So you just have to feed your mind with positive things, like you were talking about the speech, The Strangest Secret, and just audios and things, listening to audios and mentoring, following people that, like you said, that lift you up and keep you motivated. Because it's right, you really, usually when you're at your worst moment, you're about to have that major breakthrough. So it's, I don't know, it's just if people could get that message, and it's amazing how many people could actually see their dream, that they just don't realize it. But what I really want to get into the nitty-gritty of things now, kind of the fun stuff, Walter. I want to jump right into kind of the meat and potatoes, and then get back to the book, but because I'm a big dreamer, and so I like to talk about things like this, and just to throw some at you really, really big. So, Walter, would you write the screenplay for The Promiscuous Puppeteer when the opportunity presents itself?
Wow, that is a huge endeavor. It's a leap for me, and I'll explain that. Another one of the famous sayings, I guess I like to say, is that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And people with goals know where they're going, and that's not one of my goals, and I'll explain that. I have 3 other offers for books right now, and I'm not sure which one I'll do, and I'd like to have The Promiscuous Puppeteer have some life in it before I start writing another one. So I might start writing another book this summer, and so that's a priority consideration for me. So I really don't know where I'm going yet, to rephrase the saying, and not sure exactly what I'll do. But let me also touch on screenplay writing. I know that you've done some of that. I consider screenplay writing to be so different from fictional writing, because the writers have to think about characters in a way that they'll be presented on a movie screen, and they have to think about the movie set. And
I think I lost you a little bit, Walter. You may have to pop on. Let's see. Yeah, I think you're coming back on.
I'm sorry, Tamarah.
That's
My
okay.
apologies. My computer went on the blitz there for a minute. Should I continue?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I consider screenplay writing to be a special calling. It takes a special person with a special mindset who can visualize in their mind what things would look like on a movie screen. Let me explain this a little better. When I write my books, I have to put myself into a frame of mind where I am going to live another life. And while I'm writing, I have to see those characters come alive in my mind. I have to see them play, work, how they're dressed, the wardrobes that are being picked out for them, the words they're going to say, and everything else. So I can write what I see well enough that the reader of my books can see the same vision I saw when I wrote it. That's why people love to read a good book, because it transports them out of the world that they're in into another world while they're reading that story. And so to me, that is something that I must always try to do. And thank you for your compliment early on, saying that that's what my story did for you as well, that it took you to another world, to another life, where you could see, envision the things that I was saying. A screenplay writer, to me, has to take it to the next level. And that is not just to create a vision, but to actually create something that people can see on a screen. And oftentimes they have to change the words, they have to change some of the sets, some of the settings, so much so that it'll work in a movie, whereas let me phrase it this way. What worked for me in a book may not work precisely in a movie. Things have to be changed by a screenplay writer in order to make it more attractive for moviegoers. I'm very mindful of how difficult that process is, and the artistic endeavor that it takes for a good screenplay writer to be able to convert a book into a movie for people to enjoy watching on a screen. And so for that reason, I have not thought about screenplay writing. I just continue to think about fictional writing of books, and I have these 3 other opportunities to do so. But perhaps one day, maybe, if I'm lucky, someone will come along and say that they're interested in having an option or a right on the Promiscuous Puppeteer for the purposes of considering whether or not they would like to make a movie of it. My fingers are crossed, and thanks for asking that question. It means a lot to me.
Well, I can see it. I mean, I remember the first time I saw that little trailer you have of it, that I thought, this, this, it's like, to me, that's like doing a little dream board. It's like manifesting that it will be a movie and a major motion picture. But you know what? The possibilities are endless. So you just never know, Walter, what's going to happen. So, just I'm always hopeful. So, but so back to the book itself. How did you come up with the characters for the Promiscuous Puppeteer? And I guess kind of especially for the puppeteer herself, you sort of said it was her. It sounds like you got some of that inspiration from the past that you had been through yourself and the struggles, but was it something that you were going through your daily routine, and I don't know, maybe a character name pops into your head, and then the personality sort of pops in? I guess I don't know, I'm just curious as to how an actual character's personality evolves and comes to you, so to speak, especially in the book, because there were so many in this book, and that's what I was wondering, how that happened.
To me, it's almost inexplainable. I put myself, and I'm going to say some words here that I don't want people to take literally, but I want them to kind of look at the words I'm going to say as metaphors, and that is that they say a person who writes like good writers do, James Pattersons of the world, are able to put themselves in another life in their mind. And it's a form of schizophrenia that's under control. Again, I'm using a metaphor. And so what they're able to do is to live a double life. The regular everyday life around their home, and then the life they slip into while they're writing. And sometimes that life that they slip into when they're writing becomes very real. In fact, it really needs to become very real. If it doesn't, then the writer cannot write down in sufficient words enough to help the reader feel like they can see the same thing the writer saw when the writer was writing. Now, when it comes to the characters, I kid around a little bit sometimes, telling people that the Promiscuous Puppeteer became somewhat of a master over me and controlled me. But I allow myself, with my characters, I allow myself to just let the ideas flow freely, let the words flow freely. I can always edit things later. And sometimes it's kind of like watching a play or watching a movie. Sometimes the characters are standing in the wings, dressed and ready to step out on stage and do something, say something. And so I would often stare out a window, and someone might say, oh, there's Walt Biondi staring out the window. He's just wasting his life away looking out a window. But no, I'm busy thinking about how I can write something that no one has ever written or read before, something brand new, and creating something new. And so I might just stare for a while and let these figures, these people that I create, play a role and act out various scenarios. And I'm sitting at my laptop typing away, going crazy with all kinds of ideas. The Promiscuous Puppeteer, the woman that the story is all about, I allowed myself to feel as though I became her scribe, that I was writing her fictional autobiography. If you can think about that for a moment, that
Yeah.
I had a mindset that I was writing her autobiography for her, and she was telling me what she thought should be in it. That I had such an open mind where I could go in and out of this other life, where she was there waiting for me when I would log onto my computer to start typing after a few hours sleep, waiting to tell me things that she wanted to say. Oftentimes I'd go to bed at night at 10 o'clock at night, exhausted, but exhilarated because the story was maturing beautifully. And I couldn't wait to get back to my computer at 4 in the morning to see what my characters had been up to while I was asleep. And that's the fun part of this, that you are excited about what you're doing in writing. You can see these characters. They are acting out a role for you, and you're working with them and jotting down notes from time to time. I worked so hard that I didn't even know I was working. I was just so absorbed and deeply involved in the writing process. I like to kid and say to people that the Promiscuous Puppeteer, and she has a name, it's Tuponi Esau, the Promiscuous Puppeteer had some control over me, and I allowed that to happen. I liked that to happen, so much so that I subjugated myself to her power and subordinated myself to her will. And so, therefore, we got along very well, the Promiscuous Puppeteer and I. We worked together. We were kind of like co-authors, if you will.
So you have to be a little bit crazy to write fiction. Is that what you like, if the men in white coats start coming to your house, we'll know where to find you, Walter.
I love to tell.
So
I love to tell people that writing process.
So who am I interviewing today? Which character are we right now?
I like to help people understand the writing process.
No,
in the writing process.
I agree. I know.
I'm sorry.
I understand it because I told you I was writing a book. It's not a fiction book. I would like to do that one day, but I know how it is. I get in my own creative world, and it's like, I don't know. I think really highly creative people have this. They just can get in their own little world and to create, and it's sort of like you kind of have to. So I can see where you're writing something, a fiction book, where you have all those characters, where you would have to get in that, like get in their head, I guess, so to speak. So I mean, I don't think anybody's going to lock you up.
When I write, I like to tell people that I have an opportunity to create something out of thin air. And if you think about that for a second, I get to make up a lie from beginning to end. and create something that no one's ever heard of before, thought about before, written before, and it's all mine. It's my dream, and I hope that I can make it other people's dream. So when they read the book, they can feel what I felt when I wrote it.
So it's permission to lie. That's pretty good. I like that. That's kind of cool, though. But how did the idea of the book come to you? You kind of answered that question earlier. You were telling about when you were mining one time. But did the characters come first or the story? That's what I'm curious about. How did you develop? I mean, was it the characters more first than the actual story itself?
That's a great question, and I don't know that I have an absolute answer for you. When I was researching,
I mean, you know.
When I was researching to write the book, I spent about 3 years gathering information about a subject that was complicated and that had a lot of nuances to it. So I wanted to try to learn as much as I could about finances, about mining industry, gold, precious metals, and the people who were involved in that walk of life, because I thought I could write a story, a fictional story, with international intrigue, which had to be a part of my story, which I found easy to write about because of my prior experience, my prior career, and all kinds of ins and outs. Criminal activity, things that people do and shouldn't do, and I needed to then come along with characters who would be able to tell the story for me, and that was what I was not able to decide on until I was mining for turquoise in Tonopah, Nevada. When I made the decision, I would start chapter 1 at that 5,000-foot high location known as Tonopah, Nevada. At a turquoise mine where I was, and I just sat on a bluff overlooking the desert landscape down below me and began to daydream. And it's that slipping into that frame of mind where you're slipping into another world. And I was thinking Las Vegas is off to the distance, about 175 miles southwest of where I was. And could I include Las Vegas in this story? And if I did, how should I do it? And gradually ideas began to pop into my mind while I sat there and I felt the hot desert wind blowing against my face. I'll never forget that feeling in the hot sun and sweat running down the sides of my face with turquoise in the bucket I had next to me, feeling good that I had been able to mine some turquoise out of the ground that day. And I thought about, the name just came to me, the Promiscuous Puppeteer. And I won't say much more about the story, so I won't spoil it for those who intend to read it. But the names of the characters were researched. There's a reason for the names. Ultimately, sat down and started to write this story. I started the story in Tonopah, Nevada, with a man who was doing some exploration geological work for a secret gold exploration company, and what it was like for him to be in and around Tonopah, Nevada. And I had visited Tonopah. I researched the town. I walked the streets. I had enough information that I could begin to write that first chapter. I had notes for where I wanted the story to go. They were not extensive, but there was an outline. And there were certain characters who I intended to include, and I had their names picked out and what their backgrounds were like. And so as I began to write the story, I knew that I had, and again, I don't want to spoil the story, but I had I had 3 goals, 4 goals in mind. The stories, and I think good stories, usually have a moral to them. I think I had 3 or 4 of them. And there are surprises in there as to where the story goes, what was important to certain people in their lives, fictional lives, in the story that I wrote, and how I could take certain things in your life, my life, our everyday real life, the things that are of interest to me, and include them in the story, such as issues involving our Native American reservations, which are mostly located in places where there are not good paying jobs and where mining industries come and go, and how there's a lot of people fighting to try to prevent mining industries from continuing to do what they do in those remote locations near these Indian reservations, yet these types of opportunities provide better than average income for those who are near those reservations or living on those reservations, so that they have a chance at having a decent life. Well, so that's, for an example, an interest or concern that I had, and so I wanted to weave that into my book, and I did. So it all kind of came together for me, Tamarah. I felt as though there were no missing pieces to this puzzle in my mind as I began to write it. It was a flow to it. The words kept coming. I wrote for 4 months, nonstop, 7 days a week, 16 to 20 hours a day. It was beautiful the way it all just came together for me, where I could create the story and the major plot and all of the subplots. There were many, as you know, and how I would tie it all together as the story began to come to a conclusion, and also leaving some question as to whether or not a sequel would be in order. And I leave that to the readers to tell me what they think. When they finish reading the book, I'd like to hear back from them what their thoughts were, where they think the story could go or should go. So time will tell. We'll see. The characters are alive and well in my mind to this day. To say that I converse with them once in a while would add to the thinking that, yes, I am probably schizophrenic in some way. I do have these characters alive and well in my mind. I do take notes. I write down ideas on all 3 book options that I have for where I will go with not only the Promiscuous Puppeteer in the future, but with the other 2 options I have as well.
Right. You did, because you researched it for a couple years. Did you write any during that research time, or was it mostly after you did all the research? Because you said you actually did the gold mining, so when you were putting that much time into the research, because had you started any of the book yet? Is that, I wasn't sure if that, I wasn't.
No, I had file. I had a file. I had a file folder filled with notes of things that I had learned, probably more than a file folder. It was probably an inch thick, with research papers, ideas that I had, things that I had learned, and I really did undertake a major learning effort on things that were esoteric to me, that I wanted to understand and learn better so that I could speak intelligently about them. They say a writer shouldn't write a book about things that they don't have sufficient knowledge about. Otherwise, their credibility comes into question. Unless you're writing science fiction, in which case you can create anything you want, it doesn't matter. But when you're writing about something like I did, if you want credibility, you have to have some truthfulness to what you're saying and what you're writing about, so that people will say, oh yeah, that makes sense, that's true, I learned that somewhere before, and it adds to their interest to the story at hand when they're reading the book you wrote.
Right. Well, I know we talked about the characters, but was there any, I guess the only other question about the characters was just, was there any in there that that you got ideas from certain people in your life? You don't have to say who, but what did any of the characters' personalities come out of people that you know, sort of, or the people you've come across or done business with, or was it more like you were just living vicariously through them? None of them really were an extension of you or anyone around you. Does that?
An awful lot of what I have written about, particularly in Jeremiah's Tale, my last book, comes from life's experiences. And a writer who sequesters himself in a closet their entire life lacks sufficient experience in life to be able to describe the simple things that need to be able to be written about in order to bring a story together in a cohesive way where the reader will say, that makes sense. So, yes, there were many people in my life, pieces of their lives, who played a role in some of the story that I wrote, and some of the characters, and some of the behaviors, and some of the choice of words. And so consequently, I have to say, yes, you're right. The Promiscuous Puppeteer, partially, her sordid past, played a bit of a role in what I wrote about her. The second most primary character also played a role in my life. It was part of my life, has also been exhibited in what he's doing and what his story is all about, and how he works into the story with regards to the Promiscuous Puppeteer. So yes, the characters, to varying degrees, are parts of people who I have had some experience with. I'll give you a quick example. A study for a writer is to sit at an intersection of a street while people are walking by and cars are driving by, and to write down what they're observing. The things people say, whatever can be heard, the behaviors that are being exhibited, the body language that they use, the clothes that they're wearing, the way they behave sitting in their car, tapping their fingers on the steering wheel, listening to music. You know, did I just create an image in your mind? Tapping their fingers on a steering wheel, waiting at a red light, while they're waiting for the red light to turn green, listening to music, which you can hear because the window's open. You see, that's an image I just created as I said it, and hopefully you can your mind. And that's what you try to do as a writer. You observe and you write down these ideas so that you can translate or write later on them in sufficient detail that the reader, or in this case the listener, can visualize what you just wrote or said.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, what I did want to ask, I did want to ask you this. I'm trying to figure out how the best way to ask this, because I know we'll need to wrap it up here in a couple of minutes. But I did, you know, I hear that writers tend to be a bit loners, and I know when I write, I can be by myself and I'm fine with it for hours, you know. But I'm curious as to someone like you who's written, you know, got published books and everything, and bestseller, do you feel like you have to isolate yourself somewhat for a certain period of time when you are writing, and when you do, how does that, I'm curious, how does that affect your relationships, like, you know, you seeing friends and even your wife, and how do you juggle that? You know, or do you isolate yourself?
I do. I personally do, and I think different writers have different ways of writing. I know all kinds of methods. Some people will take 5 years to write a book, working 2 hours every morning before they go to another job that they have. And let me touch on this briefly. When you're writing fiction, you're writing a lie. And for example, when people testify in a court of law, if they are lying under oath, it's hard for that liar to remember all the details of the lie because it didn't happen. So defense attorneys love to be able to cross-examine a witness who's lying because they can punch holes through their story. Well, when you're writing a lie, you have to be able to remember all those lies, or you're going to make mistakes later on in the book, in the story, because you forgot what you wrote 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and you have to reread everything almost monthly to recall the lies that you wrote. Well, this is fiction, and that's what fiction is. So if you're creating a good story, and it's not a cookie-cutter story, it truly is uniquely different from the average story, which I love to be able to do. I don't ever want to become a Ford assembly line car coming off the production line looking like every other car. I want my books and stories to be very different, but they are fiction. And so when I write fiction, I have to try to remember that I need to keep all my facts together, or I'm going to lose the reader when I make mistakes. So people who write 2 hours a day and take 5 years to write a book oftentimes have a very difficult time. I, on the other hand, want to be left alone. Right now, at this moment, while I'm talking with you, I have a sign over my doorbell at the front door saying, "Please do not ring doorbell. I am in an interview with somebody." I disconnected my phones so that the phone won't ring while I'm here with you today. I think of those things. I want to be left alone so I can concentrate and focus on what I am doing with you. And so it is when I write a story. I want to be left alone. I tell people no social engagements, no social events. I'm not going to be available. Please don't call. Or I tell people in the family I need to be left alone. And so I go into hibernation, if you will, a cocoon, and I emerge, being a caterpillar, emerge as a butterfly. I go in there with nothing, and I come out with something. And in order for me to do that, my creativity to continue to move forward, I can't be disrupted constantly all day long with a lot of things. Now that's just me. That's not every writer. There are many writers who say they devote 4 or 5 hours a day, every day, to writing, and then they save the other half of the day to do other things. But for me, if the words are flowing and they're making sense, and I'm excited about how things are going, I don't want to kill that. I want to keep that going, keep it alive, because then maybe what I'm writing will turn out in the end to be just a little bit better than it would have been had I not done what I just described for you, Tamarah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good for people to know, because I don't think people realize that. I never realized it or thought about it until the first time I talked to you on the phone about. I asked you about writing, and you were telling me just that, how fiction is basically a lie. So if you take too long to write it, it's really hard to remember about the lie that you told. So it's something that you do have to focus on. So I mean, just like when you're in these characters and you're in your schizophrenic stage, does your wife ever go, well, which character are we today, Walt?
No, I just asked to be left alone.
Yeah, I'm sure. But see, you've made it work. You balance, and I think it's awesome. I really do. I have a lot of respect, a whole different. I've always had a respect for writers, period. But because I think it's just something, it fascinates me. But I have a whole new respect as far as for fiction writer, because it never really dawned on me that you are really just writing a lie. So you really have to stay laser focused with it. And so I don't know. I think that's fascinating to me, and it's very impressive that you can sit down and do that and get it done. And I mean, it's kudos to you. That's great. So finally, I guess I hate wrapping it up, but I want to ask you, Walter, what does the future look like for you, the author, just kind of quickly, and you sort of touched on this. Will there be a future for the Promiscuous Puppeteer? I mean, sounds like you might have a sequel possibility in mind.
Well, thanks for that question. The future is going to depend to some degree on and I'm being very blunt and honest about this. It's going to depend upon the sales numbers for the Promiscuous Puppeteer. It's very difficult for a book to rise to the top of the heap of all the new books coming out every year. So far, the Promiscuous Puppeteer has had 100% 5 gold star ratings by everyone who has posted a rating on Goodreads.com or Amazon.com. It's had 100% top reviews written by people who have read the book, who've enjoyed it. And I've been on 600 radio stations in the last few months, many of them fairly big ones like CBS Radio, National Public Radio, and others. And so everywhere I'm going, people are saying they love the book, they enjoy it. It is not your typical Ford Motor Company assembly line product coming off the assembly line like so many people feel other writers continue to do. They write books that just sound so much like the last book. Mine is different. Mine is unique. Mine is refreshingly new. And so I want to continue with that. And whether or not I'm able to will depend upon, and with the 3 options that I have, whether or not the Promiscuous Puppeteer continues to succeed, continues to have momentum and move forward. I'm very pleased with the results that we're getting right now. And it will take about a year to figure out exactly how well this book is doing. Right now, with almost 100% of everybody saying they love the book, I am very confident. So I'll probably start writing this summer. And I might even just sequester myself again for 3 or 4 or 5 months and see what I come up with. Beyond that, I have an awful lot of things I love to do. As you know, I'm never idle. I love to be inspired by you and others. It keeps me motivated. And I like to motivate other people as well. I work with people, I help, and I assist. I've been asked to start a speaking circuit type like a book tour, but for speaking engagements around the country. I might start doing that. I'm going to try to expand book tours. My publisher has publicists who are lining up for me, they say, more book tours for me to go on, and I really enjoy that. I'd like to do more of that. So for the next few months, and I never plan beyond a few months ahead, I know I'm going to be busy, and I know I'll be enjoying everything I do. 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, I can't say. but I know whatever I do, it'll be because it's something I want to do. I'll work hard at it. I'll put the hours into it. I'll dedicate myself. I'll work hard at it, but I'm going to have fun doing it while I do it.
Good. Well, that's great. Well, I'm sure that we're going to hear more about the Promiscuous Puppeteer, because I think you might miss her if she doesn't come back. So, you know, I think we'll all miss her. We like her seedy past. But Walter, go ahead.
I like what her whole life became.
I know, and she inspired me to get this mask anyway. So
and mine as well.
Oh God! But I want to thank you so much again for being here with me today, Walter. You have really made a dream come true for me, and I will always remember this. And I want to tell the viewers that you can get your copy of Walter's new book, The Promiscuous Puppeteer, at, you can get it at Amazon.com. Is it at Barnes & Nobles, Walter?
Barnes & Nobles, if they don't have it on the shelf, they will order it for customers. And I'm finding that that's what they're doing, is they're ordering copies based on customers coming in or calling in or going online and ordering it that way. They order the copies and then send them to the customers. Amazon.com has their supply is down to 11, I'm told, as of yesterday. It fluctuates. Some days it's at 12, 10, 9, then 11, and 12. They get 2, 3, or 4 copies every couple of days. So I'm not sure exactly what quantity is available immediately on the shelf, but I know that Barnes & Nobles and also Amazon will take orders on the internet. They'll send them to the customers. Barnes & Nobles, I'm going to be doing a 4-hour event at a local Barnes & Nobles, one of the biggest ones in the country, at the end of this month, and they ordered a large quantity of books to be on hand for that event. So I'm not sure that every Barnes & Nobles has it on the shelf, but I do know that they will order it for the customer if the customer says they'd like a copy.
Okay, great. So you can get this, and you can also get it on Kindle now, which I just learned that from Walter, I guess yesterday when we talked. But personally, I think it's such a beautiful book, the cover and everything. I had to have a real copy. I wanted the real deal. But so make sure that you check out. Also, I wanted to put this up so the viewers could see it. Let's see. WalterBiondi.com, and make sure you follow, I'm not sure which way to go with this, TamarahsCloset.com. That's my blog. So, because I'm going to write also an article about Walter in this interview, and I'll have a replay of this in my blog. So, for more on Walter, go to WalterBiondi.com, and go to Amazon.com and get your copy of The Promiscuous Puppeteer. And again, Walter, we'll do this again. I'm really thrilled that I got to do this and have you here today, and I wanted to thank you again so much.
Allow me to thank you, Tamarah. You've been so kind to me. And we've been working together off and on through Facebook and in some phone calls and on Skype. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you've done for me. And to also tell you, and all of the people, all of your friends who are here with you today and who will see your video later, how much of a joy it is to work with you, to be with you, to listen to you, to talk to you, to be inspired by you. And as a result, I consider this one of my best experiences in the whole process of having written and now helping to promote The Promiscuous Puppeteer. Thank you so much, Tamarah.
Thank you so much, and thank your wife. It's Marie, right? It's Marie, right?
Maria.
Thank her for sparing you a little over an hour with me today. So I wanted to thank her too. And gosh, have a wonderful rest of the day. Well, I'll see you when we get off air. But thanks again for coming, and stay tuned for the replay. So thank you, Walter.
Thank you, Tamarah. Take care.